Hello folks, okay, it's been a while since I've done one just based in law, but just coming across some other interesting data which sort of explains why they've set up the European Court on Human Rights. It's actually a limitation on what is supreme law or common law. These were all set up after the Second World War. It's sort of a new Magna Carta for all nations. Then they started getting nations to sign up. And of course, this is tied into the United Nations, but it is in fact law. It's international law as well. And everything that they're doing through the UK corporation, which, as I've said before, if you're looking for cause of the European Union, you've got to look at the inner city of London. And of course, they've just got rid of the guy who you voted in order to deal the British Isles out of the arms of the European Court on Human Rights. And of course, now he's gone. You've got two that they've put up there, neither of which are competent in order that we be upholding nation. No, these people are about upholding countries. Countries, of course, are person. It's not about man, or the new term they use, because it's a shade of man, the human rights. So, again, this shift to human has to be because it's taking you off man, which, of course, as we've explored, they are taking us off the biblical law and trying to shove everything into this Noahide law. So the human rights or human term is a step off man, as we've said. The term everyone, when you get into it, actually denotes humanity, the humans. Of course, the term right actually translates as choice. So when you're saying rights, what you're actually presenting to whomever you're speaking to is that you're reminding them that you have a choice as to whether you identify as person, as human, or indeed man. Now, of course, the reason why they want everybody off man is because they're installing the Noahide. So they have to take us off the biblical, which is the human, and put us ready into this Noahide. Now, when it comes to enforcing your choice, or rights, as it were, there are three sets of, or bodies of law or contracts that we need to look at. And the first is the ICCPR, 25 pages of which are important. There is the UDHR, 8 pages of importance, and the ICESCR. Again, 8 pages that are important if you're enforcing your own choice. In spite of all this corporate garbage, this absolute nonsense that they're shifting over everybody. So in essence, there's the supreme law, the common law, which is the law of the land, which was signed by our ancestors, as I said before, a lot smarter than we are today. And the corruption of that, or the shell that they've put around that, or the corruption, if you will, is the de facto. So de jure, de facto. Again, you've come across these terms before, but the corruption in essence is the implementation of de facto law, de facto government, de facto monarch, because the Elizabeth II is the chief executive of this corruption. And of course, as I've said before, the return of the king, because there are no queens in kingdoms, is getting ready to scoop up all this de facto pish and present it to you as the law. And this is a crime against humanity. It's a crime ultimately against man. So it's actually an operation in its entirety off the biblical law, completely. So this is what the priesthood are busy setting up all around you, and have been doing since the end of the Second World War. We know that they did the deeds with the person putting it on the stock market and trading you from 1933. So these were the bankruptcy declarations, the New Deals that came in with Hitler, came in with FDR. So we are aware of that. We've explored all that. But what we're going to do in this one is just have a look and explore what it is, what actual documents we need to be using when we are presenting ourselves through our choice, which all these law documents give you, but are then being hidden from you through this de facto corruption of law and government, because these governments are corporations. Okay, we know this, we understand these concepts, but just to really give credence to our actions in relation to upholding our rights, bringing to book these Johnny-come-latelys, the fruit bats at Chalker, Westminster, and in your own town as the MP, as your councillors, your judges, your magistrates, are actually operating this corruption, this de facto system. And they can do this because we don't understand what is de facto against what is de jure. So this exploration, hopefully, is going to shed a light or shine a light into the areas that we do seem to be missing, and therefore keeps us off the mark in relation to getting what it is we want in enforcing our choice. Because, of course, we know today the police are no longer taught the law. They're taught nothing but policy, so they don't actually understand this system themselves. And because we don't understand it, then we can put forward the fact that we do understand what we're doing. Let's look. At the moment, the police have set up, are in the process of setting up a new technology, which is basically a new camera system that the police are using, a bit like what they've been doing with the military since 9/11, where you've got your company out there in the theatre of combat, all with cameras live streaming the event back to a control room. And at this control room then, you've got these little Johnny-come-lately commanders pretty much running your experience in the theatre of combat. So you're not using your own wits in relation to this. You're all consistently being told what to do by this control room. And the police are actually starting to set this up using the protests. And of course, this new raft of police powers that they've just been given, specifically against protests, but obviously as you get into it, it covers much wider powers and authority that these people think they've got. And the West Midlands Police have actually announced that they're going to use this live stream body-worn camera footage. And it says this is recorded by police on the ground and viewed by officers in an operations room. Notice the term officer. Everything's officer, not constable. Officer, yeah? And of course, if you go back to the video I made on New Year's Eve a couple of years ago when I got arrested, if you listen to what I'm saying during that term, I'm making it clear distinction between officer and constable. And you can see the bemusement in these officers' faces, specifically one particular female in particular. They haven't got a clue. They don't know their ass from their elbow, you know? And they really don't. And that's because they're not being taught this. You know, I've asked questions of the police in college in relation to, are they teaching the difference between man and person? No response. You're not getting a response from these freaks because they're de facto. And every time you put something in there that's forcing them at the higher levels to show that they're operating contrary, you don't get any response because, of course, then they're liable for the response. It says the quality of the footage is said to be so good that the officer viewing it remotely will be able to see better than the police at the scene. The force said. So the West Midlands police are announcing themselves as a force. It's there. They're telling you. It's are you accepting this verbiage? Because if you accept it, you've consented. You know, we've gone through all that in the previous videos. And this article was put up on the 19th of July, and it says, from today, the latest worn camera live streaming technology will be switched on, making us the first force in the country to use it and allowing officers to remotely view another officer's body cam. The police stated that it has already trialled the software at protests. We've used it at policing operations such as football matches, protests, during pursuits with traffic officers. So the officers on the ground are not actually using their own wits and their own knowledge base on the law in order to act. They're acting in accordance with these Johnny-come-latelys in the control room. Which is why in the video on the New Year's Eve, I was asking or demanding that the Chief Inspector in control of that control room in relation to all these little numpties operating against me, I wanted him there because I knew he was liable. He's the liable constable because he is in charge of that shift. So every shift has a designated chief inspector who's operating and thus responsible. So this new system that they're putting in with this live stream body cam is going to enhance again this chief inspector sat there in the control room laying it out. Yeah. So it's important. And, you know, I was a bit before my time on that, just putting forward that it is so important that you understand that these dipsticks on the streets with the uniforms on are not operating on their own will. They're operating according to this chief inspector and his Johnny-come-latelys in the control room. So I just sort of get that across because this is exactly what they're doing. Okay. So it's policing by robots, basically. You look at these officers now all over the show, they're just pretty much robots. They haven't got a clue what they're doing, apart from say yes sir, no sir, and acting absolutely in accordance with the commands that are being put down through this control room live streaming technology that they've got going down. So that again is just another important aspect to what it is they're setting up in relation to this de facto that you out there are accepting as de jure. Because it's not. It's not. And hopefully this exploration is going to show you what it is we need to be looking at and using in relation to overriding this de facto shit that they're pumping out. And the UK is, because of course the title chair of the estates position now, which is what they've shifted our monarch office into under Queen Elizabeth II, who is a Venetian queen, not an English queen or a Scottish queen. She is a Venetian or Phoenician or Magi or Sufi systems monarch. That's what they've got and had since the installation of Queen Elizabeth II, the acclaimed monarch, not a true monarch. So it is important that we get into this and dissect it in a manner that's going to help us to enforce our choice as to whether we want to be person or whether we want to remain man or human, if you so wish. As I've said before, man's biblical, humans a step off, which they need. Persons another step off, which they need in order they can shift you all haplessly, unwittingly into this Sufi Noahide system. And of course, you know, throughout these videos I've made it very clear I call it the priesthood. Now people, depending on your own take and where you are, you're going to assume, oh, it means the Jews, the Jewish priesthood. No, the Sufi priesthood stands above the entire Abrahamic tradition. Okay, and it uses each of the religions based in it because it controls it. it fully controls it. It set you up under your own claim of I am this. So whether you're a Muslim, you're a Christian or a Jew, you've set yourself up and said, I am this. So what they're doing is they're saying, well, fine, but you better show us that you are. Because if you're not, you're going to get judged by your own belief system. Yeah? And this is what they're doing. This is the command the priesthood has over the Abrahamic religions and Buddhism and the religions coming out of India, etc., etc. They command all of them. And the minute you claim to be something, you better make sure you understand what it is you're claiming to be, because they know and they're judging you or adjudging you on your capacity to uphold and to work within. So when I've spoken recently about Islam, if you're not operating according to the Quran, you're operating to the Sharia, but the Sharia isn't in accordance with the Quran, you're kafir. You're kafir. And the main premise I've put there is the fact that the Quran's very clear that a Muslim or a follower of the Quran will obey the laws of the host nation. Of course, nation is biblical and it has laws. That's England. It's not UK. It's England. English law. Yeah, and English law is very clear. And if you're not following English law and you're over here running around claiming to be a Muslim, you're not. You're kafir. This is where the Sufi priesthood gets you, because it knows these dichotomies. You don't. Yeah? So not seeking knowledge puts you in a position of kafir, because you're over here looking to invade, install this Sharia, blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah. So that's you. Same with the Christians. You're claiming to be Christians, but you're not, are you? You're so far off the gospel law because you've been pushed back into the Old Testament law, which we looked at in the live stream last Sunday through Henry VIII time. It's been going on for a very long time. So the priesthood understand the situation, the systems, the laws of each. You're claiming to be it. They know what is, and they know where you're off the mark. You're going to be judged. You're going to be judged because they control the system that's going to judge you. Okay? So it is important that we get into the nitty-gritty of these things. And hopefully, over these last few years, I've put out enough grammar, if you've been paying attention, that should get you in the preparation for this video. Because this video is, in my opinion, the pinnacle of what it is you need to understand when you're enforcing your choice, your right, to be man, human, or person, or not. These are the rules of the game that they're hiding from you, because the de jure in this de facto pish, which is a UK-based system, UK, not England, remember, UK's corporation, which set up the European Union. Okay? So it's essential under this de facto that they get the British Isles back under the European Convention on Human Rights. Yeah? It's so important. You need to be watching that. And this shenanigans that's going on now with the Tory party, because it's the only party that has within it a mindset that knows we don't want to be under this European Lisbon Treaty in all its forms. And the first move they made in removing the Eurosceptics was to set up UKIP. Yeah, so that was just to set up to massage these skeptics that something was being done. The last game in it now, and the nail in the coffin, is you just got rid of Boris, the blonde bombshell. The only man that was saying we're coming out of Europe. You just got rid of him because obviously he was a bigger shit as the rest of them. But you've now got rid of him. And they're now open to change the game however they see fit. And I'm telling you now, the intent is to get you right back under this European Convention on Human Rights, because it limits again the rights of person. So you're already all in on person. The the European Court of Human Rights actually limits again your rights as person in readiness to shift you into this Noahide system. Okay, so here we're getting there. We're getting there slowly but surely. Right, so the deception begins through the operation of law. Okay? The operation of de facto laws, not the supreme law, the common law, the law of the land. Okay? It's through the operation of de facto laws. This is how we're being deceived. Okay? All of us. Okay? And we've explored why this has happened. War, crisis, new system installed. That generation's benefiting, so it supports it. It's groupie. It's a silent generation. It's not rocking the boat. It's not rocking the boat because it's the beneficiary of that system in its own mind. It's not really. The only beneficiary is this world of person, because everything's shifting to further you, to cement you into this idea that you are a person, okay? Which then gives the corporation all the rules in the world to slowly put that position into slavery, indentured servitude, and obviously down to absolute slave, which is the ability, no ability to contract. You know what I'm saying? You don't have the ability to contract. So that's where we're going. So it's the deception. It's based entirely on the operation of law, but those laws are de facto, not de jure. Okay? So they're not nation, it's country, which is a corporation. Okay? It's so important that we understand this. If you're operating according to country, you're not operating to the laws of a nation, you're operating to a corporate law, the corporate system. And that's basically the beginnings of this charade. So if we first go to the Black's definition of de facto, it says, de facto, di facto. In fact, indeed, actually. This phrase is used to characterize an officer, a government, a past action, or a state of affairs which must be accepted for all practical purposes, but is illegal or illegitimate. Okay, so they could talk big about legal, but it's actually illegal to follow this path, which we can see in the sense that in the legal system, they would say it's forbidden for you to drive on the road in a vehicle. Okay? However, if you apply for a license, we will then license you to break that legal statute. Yeah, so a license is a license to break this de facto law. Can you see how fantasy, how Alice in Wonderland this garbage is? Yeah, but because you've been incapacitated in reason and logic, this passes on, it passes on. It says, thus, an office, position or status existing under a claim or a colour of right, such as a de facto corporation, okay? So it exists under a claim of a colour of right, yeah? In this sense, it is the contrary of de jure. So it's its opposite, it's its inversion, which means rightful, legitimate, just, or constitutional. So nothing de facto is legitimate or based on a constitution, okay? Thus, an officer, king, or government de facto is one who is in actual possession of the office or supreme power, but by usurpation or without lawful title. So there's no lawfulness about any of these titles, which is exactly what they did with the title Queen Elizabeth II, the Chair of the Estate, or the Queen of Person. Exactly what the return of the King intends to scoop up as the real essence of the future law, your rights, etc. So all this pish. So this is what they're doing with Charlie. He's getting him ready to service the Noahide while claiming that it's the de jure, it's the legitimate, when it's not. It's the inverse. His son, who I believe is the real heroic worship figure that they're going to push in to scoop up all these youngsters, these groupie youngsters who know nothing, and accept the mathematical scientific foundation as opposed to the scientific method of science. Yeah, so all science you get into today, pseudoscience, is mathematically based. It's got nothing to do with removing what is false in order you come to the end of the scientific method where you've got only what is real at the end of it, and then you can call it scientific fact. No, this pseudoscience is all about math. It's mathematically. Look, it works mathematically, so it must be real. No. That's where I said before, there's math, which is simplicity, and mathematics. Royal Society, Jeffrey Epstein, MIT, Harvard, Royal Society of the Arts, yeah, a Delphi house, inner city of London, you know, which outside you've got Cleopatra's Needle, the mark of a boundary, it's got the rules on it, and because it's an obelisk and it goes to a pyramid, it's also representative of the Great Pyramid as well, okay? So this is what they're putting. It's got one in America and there are others across the world. But this is what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with Pharonic systems, pharaohs. We're dealing with Sumerian. So the first covenant we're looking at is the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Okay, so it's ICCPR. Now, specifically, Article 16 says, everyone, which means humanity, has the right, which means choice, to recognition everywhere as a person before the law. So it's stating you there clearly that if you recognize yourself and act as a person, that the ICCPR covenant acknowledges that you have that right to be that person. So that sanctions then everything that goes against you on person. Can you see? But the two terms there that we need to look at and be aware of is the term everyone defines as humanity or humans, and the term right actually defines as choice. Okay? So so it's basically saying humans have the choice as to whether they want to recognize themselves and be recognized as person before the law. Okay, so this is why they're acting in honor, in essence, that, you know, this ICCPR covenant actually states that you have the right, and if you're coming in as person, they have to accept that you have that right to do so. You see? Can you see? It's clever stuff, but it's on us to know this stuff. So basically, in law, it's recognised that you have the choice to present yourself as person, and what person. So that's a corporation in and of itself, or an artificial person, or a juridical person, a citizen, even an Indian, you know, a legal person, a body corporate, a servant, a subject, a fictitious person, or a moral person, and even a natural person. There's all these different terms that are incorporated in the word person, and you have the right to identify as any of these persons, and the system will recognise that and adjudicate on. But of course, you need to grasp, man is the ultimate receiver of rights from the creative force. Humans is a step off. Person is another step off. It's all coming off. Step off, step off, step off. Yeah? So that we're at the point now where everything they're doing, because everybody thinks they're a person and believes they're a person, they can now shift all this nonsense into this Noahide. Yeah? Where you'll be judged based on the priesthood. So this is the governing law of corporations. Okay, this is what we've got to look at. So this is how they have to operate, but this is what they're obfuscating so that you don't see it. The next is all human rights for all. And it says the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a Magna Carta for all humanity. So they're creating a new Magna Carta on this respect, but it's human rights, remember that, which is not person. It says some 50 years have elapsed since the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted by the United Nations on the 10th of December 1948. The Declaration was one of the first major achievements of the United Nations, and after 50 years remains a powerful instrument which continues to exert an enormous effect on people's lives all over the world. This was the first time in history that a document considered to have universal value was adopted by an international organisation. It was also for the first time the human rights and fundamental freedoms were set forth in such detail. We're dealing with the rules that these corporate governments have to operate, but then they obfuscate it so that you don't know. It was also the first time that human rights and fundamental freedoms were set forth in such detail. There was broad-based international support for the declaration when it was adopted. It represented a world milestone in the long struggle for human rights. In the words of the UN General Assembly, representatives from France. So what we're looking at here is the fundamental foundation of supreme law, which is what all these corporations, the UN included, have to abide by, but they've removed it from us. As it says, so this is a fact sheet number 2, Rev 1, the International Bill of Human Rights. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights, which is choices. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Well, of course, on person, you've lost all that. You're not operating in that way. You're not operating as a brotherhood. You're up and down trying to conquer. You're up and down trying to gain power over, So if you're thinking like that, you've sucked into this, the mimic, okay? You're off the mark. It says, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 1, adopted by General Assembly Resolution 217A111 of the 10th of December 1948. And this is the supreme law, okay? Recognised by the Supreme Court, is what I'm saying here. It says contents, background, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, International Covenants on Human Rights, worldwide influence of International Bill of Human Rights. And the annex, so this is the body that makes it up. It says the International Bill of Human Rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, optional protocol to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, second optional protocol to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, aiming at the abolition of the death penalty. So this is basically the backdrop to human rights law. This began in 1948, but the ICESCR and the ICCPR and the UDHR didn't start to get signed up until 1966. Now, previous to that, and this is the little body that's trying to usurp this to give you this person law for Noahide, enter then the ECHR, the European Court on Human Rights, okay? Because this is undermining this supreme law. And the ECHR was formulated in 1950. So the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights, is a schism specifically set up in 1950 to take you off human rights, because you're already in person at this stage, so they can limit then the rights of the corporations. So unless you're savvy with how the corporate world works, which is where Christopher Hauser comes into play, even where the Freeman movement came into play originally by getting us in our mindsets that, hang on, there's two languages going on here. You think you're coming up against the languages, you understand it because that's what you were taught, but the Law Society has its own definitions for these words. So we've come to that point, we've understood that. Now we need to understand that it's so important why we remain out of Europe, the British Isles, and yet everything that's just gone on now is that move to push you back into this ECHR. But, I mean, they've come out on Brexit, but they haven't come out of the ECHR. They're still a part of that. They had to do, because the intent is to move us back under Europe. Inner city creation, in order to capture Europe. But ultimately, to capture the entire globe. That's the intent of it. Now, in America now, they're starting to see the light. You know, it's much more difficult in a nation that's armed to the teeth because, of course, you can't enforce your will by violence as easily as you can, as we saw in this last 2 years under this garbage, this pish, United Nations again, World Health Organization, yeah. So the ECHR is so important to this system of person. It's imperative that you understand what Brexit really is. They've shilled it. Boris the shithead has shilled it because he kept us in the ECHR. He's now buggered off. He's going to make a fortune. And now you're going to deal with these two pillocks. Your whole mindset now is going to be aghast at just how stupid you've been again by getting rid of the Boris the Defeffel. You could have held him to account with this because he's the man that we voted in to serve Brexit. Now you've got rid of him. You know, we're not talking about personalities here and saying, oh, Boris was fantastic and amazing. No, he was the tit that you voted in to pull you out of this ECHR. And now you've just got rid of him. Because you think that you wouldn't have had if Boris hadn't been in. You would. No matter who were in, that would come in. Because that's the beta test and the programme to have you all now satisfy that garbage had to stay in your house for climate. They've just tested that now with this, pretending that we're all going to die in UK because we're hot. Okay, so now we're going to use an example as to what these definitions actually mean and how you thinking you're smart and fantastic and amazing, you're deceived. Okay, so let's look at ICCPR Article 2.2, okay? It says, were not already provided for your existing legislative or other measures, each state party. So there it's talking specifically about the corporation, the government, the state party. So you can see that they're mixing up the politics now. Labour's screwed, Liberals are back in control because they represent the inner city, which is why Nick Clegg was in charge of Cameron, you know, Gordon Brown was in charge of Blair, yeah, coalition governments, you know, I did quite a lot of work on that when that were going on to explain why they like those situations. So it says, each state party in the present covenant, so each corporation signed up to the ICCPR undertakes to take the necessary steps in accordance with its constitutional processes and with the provisions of the present covenant to adopt such legislative or other measures as may be necessary to give effect to the rights recognised in the present covenant. So they have to ensure that your rights to this are still there. But it's the deception then that comes in. Because you think you're dealing with a constitutional government. You're not. You're dealing with a state party or a corporation, which is Her Majesty's government. It is the House of Commons. It is the House of Lords. It is the Senate. Yeah? In America, in Canada, in Australia, in New Zealand. It's the state party. They've took you off de jure which would be a constitutional government or parliament, forget the term government. On de jure, you'd have the crown, you'd have the constitutional parliament. But you've not got that anymore. You've got a state government, state party government. The political class as a whole, be they Labour, Conservative or Liberal, make up the state party. Because they're all voting. You know? You aim all your anger and hatred at the incumbent cabinet. But you forget that they're a group together. They are a government. Labour, Liberal and Conservative. They are the state party because they're the ones doing the voting in the House of Commons. Okay? So it's not a place to parlay anymore. It's a corporation, and their aim is to get in everything that serves the corporation because you're on de facto. Okay? Now, it says Supreme Court judgments 1980, 1 SCR 54, 1979, 12, 20 to the 12th of 21. RE, authority of Parliament in relation to the upper house. So, you've got here House of Commons and the upper house is the House of Lords. In America, you've got the Senate, except, you know, you've got that situation in Australia, Canada, New Zealand. Same thing. So RE, authority of Parliament in relation to the upper house. Further, although 91(1) gave the Queen the power with the advice and consent of the Senate and the House of Commons to alter the Constitution of Canada. Now you think that means Canada's de jure constitution. You'd think it meant English constitution. You'd think it meant the Scottish Constitution, Australian Constitution, New Zealand Constitution. It doesn't, because it's speaking about the state party, the corporation, right? It says, further, although 911 gives the Queen power and advice to consent of the Senate and the House of Commons to alter the Constitution of Canada, except in certain expressly designated areas, it does not confer a power to amend the BNA Act. So it says the word Canada in 911 does not refer to Canada as a geographical unit, which is nation, which is Canada's constitution, yeah? It refers to the juristic federal unit, the corporation. So here we go. We've got the ECHR 1948, first signature to everybody. And then you've got the ICCPR, that they were both 1966, but in 1950 they also set up the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights, okay? And they tested it on lesser nations. So we'll look at this here. You've got, so in 1966, Costa Rica signed it and then ratified it in 68. Ecuador, 68, ratified in 69. Tunisia, Cyprus, Syrian Arab Republic. Yeah, so this Palestine, can you see? It's garbage, you know? Colombia, Uruguay, Libya, Bulgaria, Iraq, Madagascar, Sweden, Denmark, Chile, Kenya, Norway, Lebanon, Barbados, Russian Federation, people, signed in 68, ratified 73. Yeah? So they all signed into it, but then they didn't get it ratified till they'd seen how it worked out in these lesser nations, like Beltane, what's that? Ukraine, Mauritius, Germany. Germany signed in 68, ratified 73. So you can see that these, you know, they tested it on all these nations. Hungary, Mali, Mongolia, et al. It goes on. It goes on and it goes on. You know, Jamaica, Canada, United Kingdom. Now, United Kingdom of Great Britain, Northern Ireland signed it in 68 like they all did. but didn't ratify it till 76. So, 8 years they waited to see the test that they'd set up with the other ones that ratified it almost immediately. Democratic Republic of the Congo, Guyana, Panama, Poland, Spain, Dominican Republic, Guinea, Senegal, Peru, Venezuela, Portugal, Austria, Italy, Netherlands, Trinidad and Tobago, New Zealand. New Zealand signed 68, ratified in 78. So again, another big cheese nation at the top that they've already got. But they're waiting to see how it pans out. India, Morocco, Japan, Iceland. Japan signed in 78. So it took till 78 for Japan to sign, but they ratified it a year after in 79. El Salvador, Nicaragua, Sri Lanka, Australia signed in 72, ratified in 1980. So Australians were way, before they ratified it, after the UK, which might work in sync with the fact that a big power base has been set up in Australia, which I discerned looking into the Alpha course. And you've spoken about it. I've put it up many times at the bottom of the videos for you to have a look at. Freighter 619, I think he was called, expressed himself in his memoirs as to the reality of what was going on in Australia and why Sydney, he says, is actually running all that goes on in Israel. So again, just, it all makes sense when you can see it from this perspective. And of course, who's been following this? No, you've been following La La Land, celebrity, media, television, Hollywood, your best musician. You're all over there. That's where you take your sustenance from. Discovery Channel, Disney. You're taking your all in this charade system. And that's where you take your fundamental grasp on this earth, your life, your history. You're taking it from there, the fiction. This is where it's at. Who's looking? Who's looking? You know what I'm saying? And 30 years on me in this game, and were I looking at this? No, I were off looking at Jingle Jangle, history, blah, blah, da, 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 da. This is where it's at, and this is what we've not been following, and this is why we're at a disadvantage, And you've got France, Mexico. France ratified it in 1980. There's no signatory thing, so they must have signed it and ratified it. Mexico, Central African Republic, Democratic of Korea, St. Vincent's, Egypt, Bolivia, Vietnam in 82, Afghanistan in 83, Belgium in 83, Luxembourg in 83. See, even the European nations, it took a long time to get them to go with this. Zambia, Congo, Togo, and on, Yemen, Algeria, Ireland, Somalia, Republic of Korea, Burundi, Malta, San Marino, Niger, Sudan, Argentina, Zimbabwe, Nepal, Grenada, Israel, signed in 66, did Israel, and ratified in 91. Yeah, they're all part of it. Lithuania, Angola, Brazil, Berlin, Cote d'Ivoire, Latvia, Guatemala, Seychelles, Cambodia, United States of America, signed in 1977, ratified in 1992. Who were in power in 92? It were either Bush or Reagan, weren't it? But then Bush and Reagan, it didn't matter. Bush were handling Reagan on behalf of the Committee of 300, So it took a long time, didn't it, to get Americans quiet enough or diverted in order to get that in the United States. Okay, now, one of the main articles that they're concerned about you finding out about, so obviously they need to keep it in the shadows, is Article 18 of the ICCPR, okay? And it says, 1, everyone shall have the right to freedom of thought, conscience and religion. This right shall include freedom to have or to adopt a religion or belief of his choice, and freedom either individually or in community with others, and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in worship, observance, practice, and teaching. So now Pakistan signed this in 2010, so they're under this. So this, so if you were to look for how is this Sufi priesthood setting up Muslims to be wiped off the face of the earth, as is portrayed in the Quran as potential, it's because their insistence on installing Sharia law is in direct contradiction to this Article 18, which Pakistan is signed up to, Saudi Arabia is signed up to, Indonesia is signed up to. You signed up to this and you're breaching it. I'll just repeat again so that you understand what I'm saying. Everyone shall have the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. It says freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right shall include freedom to have or to adopt a religion or belief of his choice, and freedom, either individually or in community with others and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in worship, observance, practice, and teaching. No one shall be subject to coercion, which would impair his freedom to have or to adopt a religion or belief of his choice. The freedom to manifest one's religion or beliefs may be subject only to such limitations as are prescribed by law. Law. So that's English law, American law, Australian, not the corporation law, UK. So I'll do that again actually. Freedom to manifest one's religion or beliefs may be subject only to such limitations as are prescribed by law and are necessary to protect public safety, order, health, and morals, or the fundamental rights and freedoms of others. Number 4, the state parties to the present covenant undertake to have respect for the liberty of parents and, when applicable, legal guardians to ensure the religious and moral education of their children in conformity with their own convictions. So if you're sending your children to these schools where they're teaching them from 3 to 5 to touch themselves, you're basically making the claim that you agree. If you don't, this is where you go. And that's Article 18 of the ICCPR. This is really the stuff they don't want you to know if you're putting in paperwork enforcing your choice. Yeah? Remember, choices in law haven't to be harming another. That's English law. So that's American law, Australian law, Canadian law, New Zealand law. And any other nation that's formed itself upon English law. And I'm talking about constitutional law, not case law. Yeah? Alright, so let's have a look at how they've played this game on the old Blighty. Okay. So this is from Wikipedia, and it's just human rights in the United Kingdom. It says, human rights in the United Kingdom concern the fundamental rights in law of every person in the United Kingdom. Corporation. An integral part of the UK Constitution. UK doesn't have a constitution, but they are trying to get one. Are they not? They've announced it. We cover that in one of the other live streams. You see how they play this game? It's UK Constitution. It says an integral part of the UK Constitution. Human rights derived from common law, from statutes such as Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights, 1689, and the Human Rights Act, 1998, from membership of the Council of Europe, and from international law. Codification of human rights is recent, but the UK law had one of the world's longest human rights traditions. Yeah, but it's not UK. It's fucking England. Today, the main source of jurisprudence, federal, is the Human Rights Act 1998, get this, which incorporated the European Convention on Human Rights into domestic litigation. ECHR is the problem. Okay? Boris the shit didn't get rid of that. No intention. However, you voted him in to administer Brexit. Now you've just got him out. He's not beholden. There's nobody now beholden. In this new shenanigans in the Tory, there's nobody beholden to Brexit. It were Boris, the blonde bombshell. Aren't you clever? Oh, you're so clever, you guys out there. You know, I think you just sorted something out. So did you note how they cited common law, Human Rights Act 98 and international law, but then ended it today, yeah? The main source of jurisprudence is the Human Rights Act 1998, which incorporated the European Convention on Human Rights into domestic litigation. So enforcing your own rights, of those so mentioned, the only two you'd be dealing with would be the human rights derived from the common law and those derived from international law. Okay, so forget the Human Rights Act 98 now, because it's incorporated the European Convention on Human Rights. Can you see? So there's only two on there that you would be using: common law and international law. The others, forget it. All right, you get what I'm saying here now. So if you're showing breach of your rights, you use the common law and the international law. Be warned. Now, here's, we can see that the UK signed into the ICCPR. Okay, so that's the supreme law, remember? And it says United Kingdom, its signature in 16th of September 1968, but it was ascended or ratified 20th of May 1976. Okay, so who have we got in then? That's Labour, isn't it? Or is it Heath? I'm not sure, because Heath did all this kind of stuff, didn't he? Because he were blackmailed. So it says, campaign for incorporation. The first public call for the incorporation of the Convention into national law, so they incorporated it, was made in 1968 by Anthony Lester, who published a pamphlet entitled Democracy and Individual Rights. Then in 1974, Lord Scarman called for an entrenched instrument to challenge the sovereignty of Parliament and protect basic human rights. Okay, now, once this were ratified, this is basically what they're telling you it meant. Okay? The government of the United Kingdom reserve the right to enact such nationality legislation as they may deem necessary from time to time to reserve the acquisition and possession of citizenship under such legislation to those having sufficient connection with the United Kingdom or any of its dependent territories, and accordingly their acceptance of Article 24.3 and of the other provisions of the Covenant is subject to the provisions of any such legislation. Okay? Acquisition and possession of citizenship. So whereas English law would have determined that, now this federal jurisprudence or United Kingdom corporate government at its whim. Okay, from time to time. Just to recap, here in the UK, It began in 1948 with the International Bill on Human Rights. Then in 1948, the UDHR. In 1966, the ICCPR and the ICESCR. And then the little bad one, 1950, the European Council on Human Rights. Yeah. And then in 1998, the Human Rights Act, which of course incorporated the European Court on Human Rights Act, yeah. And then it was put in as domestic litigation. So from 1998. Just consider. But what's also interesting, if you think about it, they got the what was those bills they got in the early 90s? I can't remember its name right now, but they did that early on, weren't it, which incorporated the 120 beats per minute scenario to cover and control the launch of the next phase in the uprooting of society, the ecstasy and dance music, you know. So after 1998 Human Rights Act, it were all shoved in, and it has been since. So blur and brownering at this point. Remember that? 1998, he came in 97. Thatcher was 79. And the next big monkey was Gordon Brown and his little muppet, Tony Blair. Tony Blair's wife's father's an interesting character. He was an actor, but ended up on the High Council of NATO. So that's another interesting little point there to keep in mind. Now, we've covered this slightly, that the UK is looking to set up its own constitution. So this is the corporation. Yeah. And if we go to House of Lords Library, and this was published Thursday, March 26th, 2020, while you were all shitting yourself, completely diverted. Yeah. So it says Constitution, Democracy and Rights Commission. The government has proposed setting up a Constitution, Democracy and Rights Commission to consider broad aspects of the UK's constitution. No mention of English, Scottish. This would look at issues including the relationship between the government, Parliament and the courts, the functioning of the royal prerogative, and the role of the House of Lords, and access to justice. Now, of course, yeah, we've covered a lot of this stuff in a lot of the videos that we've done through 2020 and 21. At the changes in the police, they want to get everything online, everything's shifting this person into Noahide. Yeah, we've done all that. There you go, House of Lords, that they are setting up a UK constitution. You know, it's like I've said to you before, they were a British Constitution group back in the day, tied into Freeman movement. There is no British Constitution. There isn't one. There's an English Constitution and a Scottish Constitution. No British. No UK. But they're about to give you one. And you're all going to acquiesce because you haven't got a clue what's going on, you know. Hey, Bagum. A direct breach of contract. Yeah, it breaches the supreme law. That very suggestion, look, House of Lords, this is in breach of the supreme law that we discussed at the beginning of this. So you're going to have to maybe watch this a couple of times. I'm only absorbing it, but also, you know, it's essential that we all look at this and start to expand this in how, because these are the only two, these are the supreme law that they're all operating. They're all signed into it, all of them, but you don't know about it. So you're never the hope is you're never going to pull them on this breach of contract. So here we go. Now this is the ICCPR Article 2.2 that they're breaching, and it says, whereas I understand and claim that the state parties must take steps to give effect to all rights in the international covenant through the constitutional process. ICCPR Article 2.2 were not already provided for by existing legislative or other measures, each state party to the present covenant undertakes to take the necessary steps in accordance with its constitutional processes and with the provisions of the present covenant, to adopt such legislative or other measures as may be necessary to give effect to the rights recognised in this present covenant. This is what they're breaching with this call for a UK constitution and everything else they're doing when they stop you on the rights. This is the supreme law. All of them are signed into, all the nations, as we've just looked at, you know? So, back we go to what we said right at the start of this is the only things we need is ICCPR, 25 pages of it, the UDHR, 8 pages of it, and the ICESCR, 8 pages. Because to hide that from us, they've created 20 gazillion statutes, codes and regulations and bylaws. To hide everything that would make them lose. So we're going to have to investigate them, or we not. But for now, this is just to agitate you all in the right direction, because such a calamity has just been made with the removal of the bombshell. You're only just going to start to recognise what it actually means, because now we're going to see what this incumbent, whichever, is it going to be doing, okay? There's no intention of taking you off the European Court of Human Rights and the Human Rights Act 1998 because it incorporates it, okay? But now you know. So now we look at the Interpretations Act 1978, or what it's done. So United Kingdom signed into the ICCPR in 16th of September 1968, but it was not ratified until the 20th of May 1976. Okay? Then they had to retain your rights. Okay? So what they did is the Interpretation Act in 1978, 2 years after, and they then include, person includes a body, so they've included a body of persons, corporate or unincorporate, which then makes you, on person, an employee of the state party, right? Or the corporation, the United Kingdom. So it doesn't matter which political party is in power. Through this mechanic, the Interpretation Act, you're now classed as an employee of the state party, the political class, the corporate, yeah? It's irrelevant, left, right, centre, green, pink, purple. They're all operating as the state party. Now, Black's Law Dictionary, 3rd edition, is important to you because if you notice, the Interpretation Act says person includes. Now, this is important. It says includes. Inclusio unius est exclusio alterius. The inclusion of one is the exclusion of another. The certain designation of one person as an absolute exclusion of all others. So it's the S on the includes. It's not include, it's includes. So the S makes it singular, only what is stated. Okay? So include is different to includes. Now that's important. So the S there is the important bit. Yeah? So now we just look at person in relation to the UDHR and the ICCPR. Okay, so from the UDHR, Article 6, everyone has the right to recognition as a person before the law, and then it creates no obligation. Now, in the ICCPR, it says, and this is Article 16, everyone has the right to recognition as a person before the law. Okay, so it's in there. Clearly, they're saying you have choice. It's a choice, yeah? There's no obligation. It's a choice. The police are not giving that, are they? They're forcing you to be it, yeah? Everybody in the civil system they're doing all they can to force you to be and identify as person when it's a choice. And that in itself is a breach. It's a breach of contract. Further the definition. So under life, the legal person is an artificial entity, a corporation. You are not alive. Designated as a human, you are alive. Okay? Liberty is designated thus. Legal person is controlled by statutes and regulations. Jail. Human. So if you're a human, it's common law. Do unto others. Okay? Man. Then you're in the biblical. Now, security of the person. This is where your Church of Estates comes in. Legal person is security and monetary in the Bank Act. Okay, so it's monetary in the Banking Act. Okay, a security. Yeah, so that's what a legal person is. As soon as you've attached your given name to the surname, you're a security. Okay, and you have to identify as that for them to administer you as such. You know, you're no longer the beneficiary. We've been through all that as well. So, you know, it's there. We're getting there. We're getting there because we keep on pushing. We keep on pushing. And there's clever people out there, you know. Interestingly, I came across an extract from a book. It didn't give me the book. And we're basically overturning what we were thinking when it said that if no given name or Christian name is attached to any kind of contract, there is no jurisdiction of authority over that contract. So that's a bit of an inverse of what we've been pushing all the time, is that it's the surname. But what that was saying were that if there's no given name, Christian name in the mix, none of them have jurisdiction. So that I'm going to have to look into, because even though it's the inverse, it actually makes quite a lot of sense. So I'm going to have to try and pull together some grammar that we can explore that potential. If anybody knows anything in relation to that, please let me know. So again, let's just look at the Deception Interpretations Act. It says definitions, general definitions. In every enactment, person or any word or expression descriptive of a person includes a corporation. So they're designating their use of the word person as always to be assumed that it's inclusive of a corporation, the surname. Yeah. Now in Black's Law again, 3rd edition, it says includes. Inclusio unius est exclusio ulterius. The inclusion of one is the exclusion of another. The certain designation of one person is an absolute exclusion of all others. So whatever definitions there are, and there's various for persons, they're making it clear that their use of it is to be taken as inclusive of a corporation, yeah? And that's the S on the includes that does that. It makes it singular, only what is stated. So it is really important that we get these, because I know I'm repeating, but obviously it might save you from having to go back to the beginning again. Now, the Banking Acts do distinguish. They tell you who they're talking about. Person means natural person, an entity, or a personal representative. Now, this is because if you suss the game and you're pushing them, suing them for enslavement, which is what they're doing, this is the way out, because they can pay a natural person. Yeah. So this needs to be further investigated before I can comment further. But there is a get-out clause that they've given themselves, and that would be in definition of, in the Banking Act, of a natural person, so that they can actually pay you, when you suss them. Interesting, but it does need further investigation. Now, Black's Law, 8th edition, on person says person, 1, a human being, also termed natural person. So if you can use the term natural person to denote human being, yeah? But of course, I don't promote the term human, I promote the term man. Because that's the intent they've got, is taking us off that completely. So, shade of man, I'd rather be man. You know what I'm saying? Every day. Okay, let's look at the ICCPR. They're all signed into, so this is supreme law. Okay, this is the law they're all covenanted with, but we don't know about. So the get-out clauses, etc., if you do such this. So the ICCPR, Article 1.2. All peoples, note the word peoples, may, for their own ends, freely dispose of their natural wealth and resources without prejudice to any obligations arising out of international economic cooperation, based upon the principles of mutual benefit and international law. In no case may a people be deprived of its own means of subsistence. Yeah, I'll do that again. All peoples may, for their own ends, freely dispose of their natural wealth and resources without prejudice to any obligations arising out of international economic cooperation. So that's all your international global crap deals, the trade deals. You're not under it unless you choose to be so, based upon the principles of mutual benefit and international law. In no case may a people be deprived of its own means of subsistence. That comes under natural wealth and resources. The next one is Article 47. Nothing in the present covenant shall be interpreted as impairing the inherent right of all peoples to enjoy and utilise fully and freely their natural wealth and resources. So that's our land. That's all our public buildings. Yeah. You getting it? Farmers. You listening? Farmers. Here's you. Yep, you can protest if you like, but here's where it is. Here. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a great weekend, and I will say, till the next time.